In the spring of 1945, in a bombed-out town somewhere in southern Germany, an American soldier reached into his jacket and pulled out a small red pocket knife he'd taken off a captured German officer. In the next 10 minutes, he used it to open a tin of rations, tighten a loose screw on his rifle sling, and pry a stuck bootlace knot apart with one hand while holding his rifle with the other. He couldn't pronounce the word stamped into the handle. Neither could most of the men in his unit, so they didn't try. They gave it a new name on the spot, one that would outlive the war, outlive the army that issued it, and outlive every man who carried it home in his duffel bag. They called it the Swiss Army knife. That name is an accident of language, but the object itself was not an accident at all. It was born out of a national embarrassment that most Swiss people, even today, don't like to bring up. And the whole story starts not with a knife, but with a rifle. In 1889, the Swiss military adopted a new service rifle, the Schmidt-Rubin model of 1889. It was more advanced than anything the Army had used before, and it needed regular field maintenance, a screwdriver to strip it down, an awl to punch holes in leather harness straps, and something to open the metal ration tins that were becoming standard issue across every modern army in Europe. For the first time, the Swiss War Technical Department decided that instead of leaving soldiers to bring whatever knife they owned from home, every soldier would be issued the same tool, built to the same standard, capable of doing all three jobs at once. It sounds simple. It was not. Someone had to actually build 15,000 of these things, to a single exact specification, on a tight military deadline. And when the War Department went looking for a Swiss manufacturer who could do it, they found that nobody in the entire country had the capacity. So neutral Switzerland, a country whose entire national identity was built on precision, self-sufficiency, and staying out of other people's wars, placed its first ever military knife contract with a manufacturer across the border in Solingen, Germany. 15,000 knives, delivered in October of 1891, stamped the Modell of 1890, made in Germany, issued to Swiss soldiers whose entire job was to defend Swiss neutrality against exactly that kind of foreign dependency. That detail did not sit well with everyone, and one of the people it bothered most was a 28-year-old cutler named Karl Elsener. Elsener ran a small workshop in the village of Ibach, in the canton of Schwyz, making surgical instruments and knives. He had trained in France and Germany before coming home to set up shop, and he sold his early knives through a hat store his mother Victoria ran in the same town. He was not a wealthy man. He was not politically connected. What he had was a very specific kind of stubbornness, the kind that decides a wrong needs fixing and doesn't stop to calculate the odds first. Elsener understood the actual problem. No single Swiss workshop, including his own, had the volume to fulfill a military contract of that size alone. So instead of trying to compete with Solingen by himself, he did something almost nobody in his position would have thought to do. He organized his competitors. In 1891, he brought together a group of Swiss knife makers into an association, the Association of Swiss Master Cutlers, pooling their capacity so that, together, they could actually deliver what Germany had been delivering. It worked. Production of the soldier's knife moved to Switzerland, and the embarrassment that started this whole story quietly ended. But Elsener wasn't finished. He thought the original design was clumsy, heavy, with all its tools stacked on one side of the handle, wasting space and weight. In 1896, he solved that with a piece of mechanical thinking that's almost too simple to sound important. A single spring, running through the center of the handle, holding tools in place on both sides at once. One spring, double the tools, half the wasted material. It's the same basic engineering principle every multi-tool on the market still uses today, and Elsener worked it out in a workshop in a village most of the world had never heard of. In 1897, he patented the design that came out of that breakthrough, a smaller, lighter civilian and officer's version with a second blade and a corkscrew, which he called the officer's and sports knife. It was never part of the military contract. Officers had to buy their own personal gear, and this was the one Elsener sold them, and eventually sold to anyone else who wanted one. It was this version, not the plain military-issue tool, that would go on to become the shape the entire world now recognizes. For over a decade, Elsener's little company didn't even have a proper name. It just quietly made knives. Then, in 1909, his mother Victoria died. In her memory, he named the company after her, Victoria. And in 1921, when the cutlery industry adopted a new kind of rust-resistant metal called stainless steel, inox, short for the French term for it, Elsener folded that word into the brand as well. Victoria plus inox. Victorinox. A tribute to his mother and a description of the metal, fused into one word that would eventually be recognized in over 120 countries. Here's where the story gets a detail that people almost never expect. Elsener was not the only one. In 1893, a separate Swiss cutler named Paul Bochat founded his own knife company, and by 1908 that company, which would later take the name Wenger, had secured its own contract to supply the Swiss military. From that point on, two separate Swiss companies were both making, both marketing, and both fiercely defending their claim to being the real Swiss Army knife. Wenger called itself the genuine Swiss Army knife. Victorinox called itself the original Swiss Army knife. For nearly 100 years, the Swiss government simply split the military contract between the two of them. Year after year, two rival companies from two different sides of the same small country, each one convinced they were the true version of an object that, to the rest of the world, was just one thing. That rivalry lasted 97 years. It didn't end because one company outdesigned the other. It ended in 2005, when Victorinox simply bought Wenger outright, folding its century-long rival into itself and finally settling by acquisition, an argument that engineering alone had never been able to close. But by then, the knife had already stopped being a Swiss story. It had become an American one, and that happened almost by accident, through a language barrier, at the end of a world war. When American soldiers occupied parts of Germany and Austria after 1945, they encountered Swiss-made officers' knives. Some pulled off captured German officers who had bought them privately, some picked up in local shops as souvenirs. The knives were compact, absurdly practical, and covered in a language nobody in an American infantry unit could pronounce: Schweizer Offiziersmesser. Soldiers didn't bother trying. They just started calling it what it obviously was to them: a knife the Swiss Army used. The name stuck so fast and so completely that within a few years it had replaced the actual product name almost everywhere English was spoken. Victorinox itself didn't formally start using Swiss Army on its own packaging until 1952. The company adopted the nickname the Americans had invented for it, rather than the other way around. Soldiers brought them home by the thousands. Post-war exchange rates meant an American GI's dollar went a long way in Europe, so many bought not just one knife, but several. One for himself, one for his brother, one for his father, one to sell or trade back home. They ended up in kitchen drawers, tackle boxes, Boy Scout troops, and glove compartments across the entire United States. And an object that had been designed to strip down a Swiss military rifle became, almost overnight, the default American symbol of being handy, prepared, and self-reliant. That reputation only grew from there. American presidents gave them as diplomatic gifts. NASA equipped astronauts with them as part of survival kits for the Mercury and Gemini space programs, on the reasoning that in an emergency landing anywhere on Earth, jungle, ocean, desert, ice, a single reliable multi-tool could matter more than almost anything else in the capsule. In 1985, a television character named MacGyver built an entire show around the idea that with enough ingenuity and the right small tools, you could get out of nearly any life-threatening situation. And the pocket knife on his belt became inseparable from that idea in the public imagination. By the time the Cold War ended, Swiss Army knife wasn't just a product anymore. It was a figure of speech. People started calling anything unexpectedly versatile: a software program, an employee, a strategy, the Swiss Army knife of whatever field it was in. A tool built to strip down a rifle in 1889 had become the universal English shorthand for one thing that can do everything. Then, on a Tuesday morning in September of 2001, that entire reputation collided with a new reality. Within days of the September 11th attacks, new aviation security rules banned knives of any kind from carry-on luggage on commercial flights. For a company whose entire identity was built around a folding blade carried in a pocket, this was close to an existential threat. Airport security checkpoints began confiscating Swiss Army knives by the millions. Travelers who'd carried the same knife in their pocket for 20 years without a second thought suddenly had to surrender it in a bin, forever, in front of a stranger in a blue uniform. Victorinox had to do something almost no successful product in history is ever forced to do: redesign its own icon to survive a world that had turned against the one part that made it famous. The company leaned harder into tools that had nothing to do with cutting: corkscrews, USB drives, pens, flashlights, tweezers, scissors, building travel-legal multi-tools that kept the brand alive at airports, even as the original blade and red handle version stayed banned from cabin luggage for good. The company didn't just survive that, it leaned into its own absurdity. Victorinox now makes a model called the Swiss Champ XLT, carrying more than 80 separate tools and over 100 functions on a single frame, thick enough that most people who own one have never used more than 6 or 7 of those tools in their life, and don't care, because owning it was never really about the tools. It was about what the object represents. The idea that no matter what breaks, jams, needs opening, needs tightening, or needs cutting, you already have what you need in your pocket. And that's the part of this story that circles all the way back to where it started. A tool invented to fix a Swiss Army's national embarrassment over a rifle contract has become, more than a century later, one of the single most recognized symbols of individual preparedness on Earth. It sits in bug-out bags, glove compartments, tackle boxes, and desk drawers on every continent. It went to space before most of the people watching this video were born. It survived a 100-year rivalry between two companies who each believed they alone were the real one. And it survived the one historical event that should have killed it entirely. Karl Elsener never called it a Swiss Army knife. He never got to see it fly to space, never saw an American action hero build a television show around the idea it represented, never saw it become a punchline and a compliment and a survival essential all at once. He just wanted Swiss soldiers using a knife made by Swiss hands. Everything after that, the name, the myth, the astronauts, the 97-year rivalry, the 80-tool monster editions, the small red rectangle sitting in millions of pockets and bug-out bags around the world right now, that part, nobody planned. It just happened. One small decision at a time, starting with one stubborn cutler in a village most people still can't find on a map. If you found this interesting, subscribe. Every week we take one object survivalists actually carry and dig into the story of how it got there.